So yes, I am Zakhar Popovych. I am on Maidan from the first day of its beginning. Yes, I don't sleep in tents, but I visit this place every day. And this is my red flag. I arrived up on Maidan on the 24th of November. Yes, and I was on the beat as much as possible. Let me show some PowerPoint slides. This is for the 22, yes, November 22. The first day Maidan National we were there. Yes, this is the big rally of 24th, yes, of November.
What does the sign say? What does it say?
For European Union, for Europe, for Socialist Europe. It's absolutely clear. Europe should be socialist, right? I think that most of people here agree. Yes, and this is on the civil society Maidan. You remember there were two Maidans on some point, and here is the action of leftists and liberal activists on the 25th. This is 27th. This day we were attacked by far-right, actually. Too many men, yes, for them. Yes, this is the 30th November, just before this attack. And this is some slides of photos of our actions outside Maidan. Okay, let me begin to speak. I'll move somewhere here. Okay. So, first point is about the Maidan, yes? I think it was clearly the popular and grassroots movement. It is definitely not a manufactured one. I never saw so many people demonstrating in downtown Kiev since 2004, when the first Maidan happened, as you remember. No political rally or public event had attracted so many people during this last decade, actually. Yes, it's true that rallies of right-wingers could possibly sometimes attract thousands of people. Well, for example, on some Ukrainian insurrection army day, yes. But the first Euromaidan rally you saw was 50,000 people. And it is clear that it was mass mobilization of Kiev citizens. Mobilization of people angry with corrupt, ineffective and greedy government. It was against the government of oligarchs who are robbing the people of Ukraine. And you should understand that economical political system of Ukraine is manufactured by oligarchs perfectly to make this robbery as legal as intensive as possible. Political system, which is totally controlled by oligarchs, supplied them with legislation that made tax dodging absolutely common and absolutely normal practice. If you are a Ukrainian oligarch, you would pay no profit tax at all. This is the rule of Ukrainian economy. Yes. And the most of taxation pressure is on the workers and small business owners. Even if talking about income tax, yes, formally we have a flat rate income tax. Effectively, we have the progressive rate in opposite direction because workers' wages are effectively taxed approximately by 40%. And when the wealthiest guys are paying the flat tax, they are paying only 17% from their shareholders' dividends, yes? And for the most people of Ukraine, the euro means justice and social justice at first. I personally met on Maidan the unionist, workers' unionist, miners from Lugansk region. Volodymyr Sokolov from Vodenki, it's the independent miners union in Lugansk region, far east of Ukraine, said to me that we want courts to act. He explained, yes, that when our union activists face illegal firing, it takes up to 3 years of trial to re-establish them in their jobs. And actually, it means that employer could fire anybody and not consent about any union demands. And we want to stop such practice, he told me. We want to reform the court system. We want to secure the rule of law in our country. And association agreement with the European Union includes this obligation to introduce the reform of courts. And we demand government to sign it. That is because this independent union joined the Maidan. And this was our left opposition demand we call to sign the association agreement without the free trade agreement. Political part of the association agreement also includes some contradictory points. But in general, it can help to make Ukraine more democratic, more free-minded, and it could secure the rule of law. And you should notice that we have the labor law, the Soviet labor law in Ukraine. And in most cases, this law is on the side of the workers, not of employees. And Soviet labor code in Ukraine was preserved, not cancelled like it was in Russia. And we want the Soviet labor code to act in Ukraine. And this is the point why we want the association agreement action. Yes, the next point is about the right wingers, yes? It is true that your Maidan movement was initiated by right-wing opposition. And it is also true that the most organized and influential part of this right-wingers is the far-right party Svoboda. I consider this party as one trying to develop itself in a Hitlerism direction. It's not just argumentum ad Hitler. Some of the leaders of this party are busy popularizing the heritage of Hitler and Goebbels into Ukraine. For example, main theoretician of this party, Mr. Michalczyk, personally translated Dr. Goebbels' Das kleine ABC des Nationalsozialisten and published it in collection articles together with NSDAP 25 points program, Strong, my executive essay, also translated by this theoretician, yes? And altogether, with his article, for example, he personally wrote the article named Revolutionary National Socialism. But no surprise that as soon as huge mass demo was finished, the density of these Nazis on square meter began to rise dramatically. And on the 27th of November, the flagstaff of my red flag was broken by C-14 militants affiliated with Svoboda. You can see the flag was chipped, even a bit mastificated, but not eaten. And unfortunately, many of our banners probably was eaten. Definitely no piece of them was left. In later days, on Maidan, dozens of leftists and union activists were attacked by far-right militants. It is true. Well, a little story. In the evening of 29th of November, it seems like Euromaidan is over. Just few hundreds of radical students left the square. But as you all know, violent police attack on the early morning of 30th November caused the level of protesters to rise. And as soon as a new wave of mass movement flooded squares, Nazis systematically found themselves in a small minority with a little ability to influence movement. And propaganda of left socialist ideas was possible. Each time it was really big rally, and it was possible any time outside the Maidan. In the first days of December, we organized a number of public events outside Maidan, mostly in downtown Kyiv. One of them was 200 strong, 200 people marching against police violence. Unfortunately, authorities were not noticed appropriately according to the law, because the Kiev City Council was captured by Svoboda people, and we are not allowed to make this application. But actually we have no security problems, neither with police nor with Nazis. On the big rally on Sunday of the 9th of December, we made successful intervention on Maidan using the separate free microphone stage, with absolutely new banners, new posters, as you can imagine, but surely with the same content of socialist agitation. Yes, and the next point is about the change in movement after the emergency laws were introduced. Days and weeks passed, and as you might imagine, zero reaction of government were making people more and more angry. We felt themselves cold, tired, and hot, makes us even more angry. Government just waited while we give up and disperse, showing no sign to willing to consistent talks even with opposition leaders. And when the number of protesters begin to decline significantly, the government decides to smash remaining ones. The emergency laws of 16th of January passed through Parliament and were introduced in 19th of January. Protesters became very hungry with this movement, and insurrection began. People moved from Maidan Square and attacked the police on Grushevsko Street approaching the Parliament. Yes, and this is true that the first attacks against the anti-riot police of Berkut were organized mainly by neo-Nazis of the province sector, who are still more radical than the Svoboda party. But it is also true that in the following days, many ordinary, very different people have entered the struggle. Thousands of them have bought tires, auto tires, yes, oil to feed this big fire, huge fire. Among the activists, I have seen very different people, and actually mostly Russian-speaking people. Many youths from suburbs of Kiev. This was very different actually from people of Maidan. It is true that most of people living on Maidan in tents are people from Western Ukraine, Ukrainian-speaking people. And most of people throwing Molotov cocktails on Grushevsko Street was clearly hipsters from Kiev, mostly Russian-speaking actually. And of Berkut was conducted, so we have the last evening available for discussion, because the next day revolutionaries were removed from this building by attack, and we lost our equipment, but we not lost our faith. Yes. The next thing I want to tell is more concerning the role of the left after the resignation. Not resignation actually of Yanukovych, but after Yanukovych go away. This is about the Ministry of Science and Education. Soon after President Yanukovych ran away, radical students occupied the main building of the Ministry of Education and Science, and which is important, Svoboda people were not allowed to enter this building. The position of Minister of Education and Science is actually in Svoboda quarter in new government. But they decided not to appoint a radical party member like Mrs. Ferion, but supported the relatively moderate Mr. Kvit, who is the rector of Kiev Mogila Academy and formerly is not a member of the party. And students, before Mr. Kvit was allowed to enter his office, he had to defend his program for education and science in face of students' assembly and answer many questions. Not always polite questions, sometimes very unpolite. Moreover, he was forced to sign a roadmap plan prepared by students and mostly left-wing students. And we are now moving forward on the steps of this roadmap plan. It is not forgotten, and students' assembly still is in control of its fulfillment. Me and my comrades from left opposition now personally involved in an open data project. Brilliant automation expert Mrs. Kijova is now deploying a new accountancy automation system in ministry, and we will publish at the internet all raw data of general ledger, all postings, yes? First, Deputy Minister Mrs. Ina Sofsun is now giving much consideration on this project, and I am sure that it will be published not later than the beginning of April. And beginning from that date, that moment, it will be published daily, every work day. And the mass movement of students' assembly actually convinced Crete to do it. At the beginning, Crete didn't want to do it. He didn't understand. But because he was forced to hear the people's voice, he signed it, and the real steps are making to do this. So I invite everybody to download our raw data of Ministry of Education, analyze it. Probably some British experts could help to advise some optimization of processes in ministry business. And the next ministry we have planned to open is the Ministry of Culture. They also declared, the assembly of artists in this ministry declared they also want this to be, but we have not enough resources to make simultaneous automation of different places. Yes, and I'm sorry about the time, so okay. Very important point about the participation of workers in Euromaidan. This point actually convinced me in democratic and social character of this Ukrainian revolution. This is the role of independent workers' union, and especially in Kryvyi Rih. Kryvyi Rih is a big industrial city of southeast. It is big, mostly Russian-speaking Ukrainian city, typical in that sense. And it has approximately 1 million inhabitants. Most of them are industrial workers. Real workers employed by working industrial enterprises, mostly miners and metallurgists that are producing ore and steel. Many cities, yes, of East Ukraine were deindustrialized and declined after the crisis of 90s, but not Kryvyi Rih. As you know, we had huge decline in machine building and metalworks production, but not in raw material production. And this city is actually the capital of iron ore excavation of Ukraine. Even the dust in the city is red. Maidan here was also initiated by small business and merchant collectives. But the role of workers is now very significant. The Maidan was enormously massive mobilization here. There were many thousands of protesters. It's impressive for Kryvyi Rih. Up to 5,000 and even more. For comparison, pro-Russian events in Kryvyi Rih attract up to 100 participants, 200-300 at maximum. And most of them, the agitators for Euromaidan, trying to find out why these people are actually rising this tricolor, Russian tricolor in their city. The trick is that nobody in the city knows these pro-Russian guys. One of them actually was active in civil society, unions, political life. There are some bikers, you know, Putin like to speak with bikers making some well, but nobody knows who they are and where they're from. Well, at the moment today, it was approximately 10 pro-Russian activists still standing in a picket line near the local government building, and approximately 1,000 of Maidan participants. Yeah. And the leaders of Independent Union of Miners I want that dozen of representatives elected to the Rada Maidan, yes, the Maidan Council of Kryvyi Rih. The coordinator of Miners Union, Comrade Yuri Samoilov, is the commander of Miners 100, which is the major unit of Maidan self-defense forces in Kryvyi Rih, formed from miners, yes. And self-defense there is important because administration of mines owned by Akhmetov and especially by Russian oligarchs, is Gevraz group so-called. They organized the paramilitary Titushki units, and these units conducted attacks on protesters, burned offices of oppositional leaders, and only after that the self-defense units in Kryvyi Rih were formed. And now the Miners 100 is busy in joint patrolling of the city with the local militia. Yes, militia is the name of police in Ukraine actually. At the beginning of Maidan, miners told me, we support it in general, but it is not our revolution. And now they felt it is. We do feel it is our revolution, they say, at least at Kryvyi Rih. Yes, and yes, about the new government and actually some points I think important to support us. Yes, it is true, and Volodya told about this in more detail, that new government incorporated these neo-Nazi-minded leaders of Svoboda Front. These people are really crazy about establishing new life in radical Ukrainians, rational Ukrainians, yes. The slogan they shouted at Maidan is just translation into Ukrainian of Deutschland über alles. Yes, and they dreamed to be this way, will be equipped with nuclear weapons and intercontinental missiles at least, yes. And believe me that Ukraine has enough resources to do it. Missile plant in Dnipropetrovsk is ready to produce these missiles immediately. Newly appointed Dnipropetrovsk governor and notorious oligarch, Mr. Kolomoisky, just on this week inspected this missile plant. Yes, Kolomoisky is a leader of Ukrainian Jewish Congress, actually. But it doesn't prevent him of being right-wing and anti-workers guy. And one point, willing to be Nazis don't mean you automatically are. Under circumstances of pressure of mass movement, they can't push their far-right xenophobic agenda. The problem is that if Ukraine will go on war with Russia, this fascist agenda could probably be accepted in society. But at the moment, we still have no war in action, and we have chance to avoid it. At the moment, it is true, government completely forgot social slogans of Maidan. Instead of dividing government and business, we have oligarchs appointed as governors in Dnipropetrovsk and Donetsk regions. Instead of Maidan point that oligarchs should be taxed 10% of their wealth, we hear no word about taxation of big business, and opposite, we have a clear declaration of absolute agreement for all demands of IMF, which is clearly the big business agenda. Consequently, we, as a left opposition, we as left of Ukraine, recognize this government as legitimate and revolutionary one. It is, yes, sorry to stop. This government was clearly formed of the wave of really mass grassroots mobilization of Maidan. It declared its responsibility to mass movement of Maidan. And we appeal to all governments of the world and to Russian government among us to recognize this government as legitimate one. But, excuse me, we do not support it politically. We do practically support it in some local initiatives, like the Open Data project I mentioned. But we don't support and backing it in backing of monument destruction, its language legislation initiatives. Using war threat as an excuse, new government is backing extremists who destroy Soviet monuments, incorporate far-right militants into policy and warfare. Generally, we do not support its chauvinistic and anti-communist history, which they are trying to inflate using war threat. And as a backgroup, they are inflating the war threat by this history. To stop the inflation of war history and actually to prevent the war, we should find to reunite country politically. And it is possible not on the ground of radical nationalism, but around the social justice agenda. It is true that many people of East and South Ukraine do not trust new government very much. I do not think they trust Putin and pro-Russian extremists either, but they do not trust new government. And you should notice that so fast change in mind of these MPs of Party of Regions made voters of East and Southern Ukraine feel betrayed and excluded from the government. Formally, the Ukrainian parliament is absolutely legitimate. But the former majority of it, I mean the Party of Region MPs, are now representing just nobody. Voters of Crimea are very angry with these MPs. And this fact is systematically used by separatist propaganda, for example, by Crimea parliament speaker who declared himself a new leader of Party of Regions in Crimea. Therefore, to press Ukrainian government to declare re-election of parliament is the first must. Re-election of Rada is the only way to make it representative for the both east and west of Ukraine. And I'm sure that in present situation it would be very hard to falsify the vote. And the composition of parliament would change much in favor of representatives who are really trusted by people. And I'm also sure that the social justice agenda will be pushed to the front. The second, but not less important, even more important appeal is to press Russia to withdraw troops from Crimea. This is a prerequisite for any legitimate referendum and even recognition of independence in Crimea, for example. Otherwise, Crimea remains not recognized country. It had economic crisis, no air connection, no water supply, no tourists. And this semi-war situation will be used by Ukrainian far-right to suppress democracy and social justice agenda. We appeal to European left not to back Russian intervention in Crimea. I will even say strongly, you should firmly oppose it. And of course, international observers in Crimea are needed as much as possible. And last points. Of course, Ukrainian civil society and even more some government institutions need your technical support. I mentioned the open road data initiatives to eliminate corruption in the Ministry of Education and Science, and we hope it will spread to all governmental institutions. British have significant experience in open data projects, and you are welcome to advise and help us. Also, please, support independent workers' union. Most of them are locked in industrial regions and has very little influence on big politics in Ukraine. Help them to build their institutions. They realized they need their own labor party, separate from oligarchs, but they have very little experience in building such institutions. Finally, it is of course important to show zero tolerance for the far right in government, which is present now in Ukrainian government. And of course, European activists and personalities are strongly welcomed in Kiev to talk about all these problems. It is still possible to talk there freely, and I'm sure you would attract a significant audience. Thank you very much.